She expected him to beg for mercy, but he asked her for a duel. The city of Orlaia Prime stretched far and wide, a gleaming jewel in the void of space. Towers of glass and steel reflected the twin suns above, casting a warm light across the bustling streets below. Hovercraft zipped silently along magnetic highways, while citizens of countless species moved with purpose, their eyes fixed on screens broadcasting the latest news from the Galactic Council. For many, Orlaia Prime was a place of order, innovation, and power. But today, it would witness something entirely unexpected. Captain Leora Valen strode through the council chambers with the precision of a seasoned commander. Her every step exuded authority, every movement calculated and sharp. She had spent decades building her reputation, and in the galaxy of elite tacticians, she was unmatched. The council, a mix of humans, aliens, and artificial intelligences, had assembled to witness what they believed would be another routine conquest, a formal surrender of a minor commander from one of the outer systems. The expectation was clear. Leora would assert dominance, the opponent would bow, and peace, or at least submission, would be restored. The room fell silent as Commander Kale stepped forward. Unlike Leora, he did not carry an aura of invincibility. His uniform was neat but unassuming, his posture confident yet not arrogant. There was a calm in his eyes that seemed out of place in a chamber filled with tension. For a moment, the council expected the obvious, a plea for mercy, trembling hands raised in surrender. Kale did not bend a knee, he did not lower his gaze, he simply looked at Leora and spoke. "I request a duel," he said, the words echoed through the chamber. A duel against Leora Valen. The council members exchanged incredulous glances, some chuckled nervously. Others muttered warnings under their breath. No one had ever dared challenge Leora directly. The expectation of fear, submission, or immediate surrender was the universal script, and Kale had thrown it out entirely. Leora's eyes narrowed. She had encountered audacity before, but nothing like this. She expected fear to be visible in his expression, hesitation in his stance. Instead, Kale stood tall, calm, unwavering. She could feel the murmurs ripple through the assembly, whispers of disbelief and curiosity. "What kind of duel do you propose?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with interest. The council had expected her to issue commands, to enforce submission. Now she had to respond to an unexpected twist. Kale's reply was precise, unshaken by the weight of the chamber's attention. A duel of strategy and skill, no weapons, no destruction, only intellect, creativity, and adaptability. The chamber went still. Some council members looked at each other as if he had suggested something absurd. Yet the humans among them exchanged glances filled with cautious admiration. It was daring, unusual, and completely human. Leora leaned forward slightly. "You think you can challenge me?" "I do," Kale said simply, "and I will not beg for mercy, I will not surrender. I only ask for the chance to prove my approach." For a moment, Leora studied him. She had faced hundreds of opponents, each thinking they could match her experience, her years of planning, her instinct for anticipating every move. All had failed. All had pleaded, faltered, or fled. Kale's calm, direct manner, his willingness to face her as an equal without fear, was unprecedented. "Very well," she said finally. "We will have a duel. The terms will be determined by the council." The council members murmured among themselves, and soon the duel was formalized. It would take place in the city's holographic simulation chamber, a space designed to test not only physical skill, but intelligence, creativity, and strategy. The arena could shift, change, and challenge its participants in ways that mirrored real-life tactical situations. For Leora, it would be a test of her mind against a human's unpredictability. For Kale, it would be an opportunity to show that ingenuity and courage could overcome centuries of experience and expectation. The days leading up to the duel were tense. Leora immersed herself in preparation, reviewing every known strategy, every possible scenario she might encounter. She had always relied on careful analysis and anticipation, yet Kale's reputation gave her pause. There were whispers in the streets of Orlaia Prime. The human commander dares to challenge Leora Valen. Many dismissed it as bravado, but curiosity was already taking root. Kale, on the other hand, spent his time studying the simulation chamber, learning its nuances, understanding its possibilities. Unlike Leora, he did not try to memorize every pattern or predict every move. Instead, he focused on adaptability, on being creative in real time, on seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles. Friends and colleagues questioned his approach. "You must plan every detail," they warned. But Kale's reply was simple. "I can prepare, but I cannot control everything. The duel will test how we respond when plans change." The day of the duel arrived, and the chamber was packed. Citizens from across the city, media drones hovering, and council members seated in observation pods. The holographic arena came to life with a cascade of light, forming a shifting landscape of platforms, obstacles, and puzzles that defied gravity and logic. The air buzzed with anticipation. Leora stepped in first, her presence commanding as the light reflected off her uniform. Every eye in the chamber followed her. She was confident, poised, ready to demonstrate her unmatched skill. Kale entered after, his calm demeanor unshaken by the crowd, by the massive spectacle surrounding him. There was no fear, there was no hesitation, only determination. The duel began with the arena presenting its first challenge, a complex sequence of floating platforms that required timing, precision, and quick thinking to navigate. Leora moved with practiced perfection, calculating every step, anticipating each shift of the platforms. Kale mirrored her movements at first, keeping pace, then began to innovate, taking unconventional paths, using momentum and creativity in ways Leora had not predicted. The audience gasped and cheered at each move. It was not the clash of weapons or explosions that held them enthralled, but the battle of minds, the display of human ingenuity against experience honed over decades. Leora realized that this duel was not just a test of skill, but of imagination, adaptability, and courage. And Kale, in his calm human way, was challenging every assumption she had about strategy and victory. Hours seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. The challenges evolved, becoming more intricate, more unpredictable. The arena shifted constantly, forcing both duelists to adapt, to think ahead, to innovate on the spot. Leora felt something she had not experienced in years, excitement mixed with uncertainty. Kale was unpredictable, not in recklessness, but in his ability to see possibilities beyond the obvious. As the duel continued, spectators began to recognize the larger story unfolding. This was not about defeating an opponent. It was about understanding, respect, and the power of ingenuity. Leora and Kale were pushing each other to new heights, demonstrating that intelligence, creativity, and courage could be just as compelling as raw power or authority. By the time the sun set over Orlaia Prime, the chamber's lights reflected off the shifting arena, painting a mosaic of color and movement. Both duelists paused, breathless but unbowed. Leora met Kale's eyes and saw not arrogance, but a quiet confidence that demanded recognition. Kale returned her gaze with a mixture of respect and determination, as if acknowledging that this duel was bigger than either of them alone. The audience erupted in applause. Not for a victor, but for the display of brilliance, courage, and humanity that had transcended expectation. It was a moment that would be remembered across Orlaia Prime, and perhaps the galaxy, as the day a human dared to challenge a legend, and did so with honor, creativity, and unshakable confidence. Leora knew, in that instant, that this duel was far from over. It had only begun. And for the first time in decades, she felt the thrill of genuine uncertainty, of facing an opponent whose mind was as sharp and inventive as her own. Kale had not begged for mercy, and in doing so, he had earned something far more valuable: respect. The council chambers would speak of this duel for years to come. Citizens would debate, analyze, and marvel at the ingenuity displayed. And Leora herself would reflect on a simple truth. In the galaxy of elites, power and experience mattered, but human ingenuity, the ability to see beyond the expected, could change everything. As the chamber cleared and the crowd dispersed, Kale approached Leora with a simple nod. No words were needed. The challenge had been accepted. The duel would continue. And somewhere in the quiet confidence of a human mind, the future of Orlaia Prime, and perhaps the galaxy, was beginning to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The morning after the first duel, Orlaia Prime was alive with discussion. Citizens crowded the streets, hovering over hollow screens showing replay footage of the duel, their voices full of awe and speculation. Some argued about the brilliance of Leora's strategy. Others marveled at Kale's ingenuity, whispering that no one had seen a human think so creatively in generations. In every corner of the city, There was a shared excitement, a sense that something new and extraordinary was unfolding. Leora Valen, however, did not feel exhilaration. She felt a tension she hadn't known in years. She had won most battles before they began, her reputation as the galaxy's most precise strategist preceding her. But Kale's calm intelligence, his willingness to challenge her without fear, had unsettled her in ways she did not yet fully understand. She returned to her quarters in the council complex, pacing slowly as she considered the duel to come. She had to win, yes, but the thought of facing Kale again filled her with an unusual mix of respect and curiosity. Kale, meanwhile, moved through the city differently. He did not retreat to quiet study or isolation. Instead, he observed, walked the streets, watched the citizens, and thought. He considered not only the simulation arena but the broader lessons it might teach. The duel was a test, yes, but also a story of human potential. He wanted to learn, not just to win. He noticed how people adapted, how they responded to sudden changes, and how they solved problems without violence. He took mental notes, understanding that his advantage lay not in raw experience, but in adaptability and creativity. The next challenge of the duel was announced. It would take place in the Innovation Dome, a massive structure built for testing minds against impossible scenarios. The dome could generate holographic landscapes, artificial ecosystems, and dynamic puzzles that shifted in real time. The council explained the rules once more. No harm would come to either participant, no destruction of property, and the goal was to complete the challenges with efficiency, creativity, and resourcefulness. Points would be awarded not only for speed but for ingenuity. Leora studied the announcement carefully. She had already prepared for similar tests of logic and strategy, but she realized she had never faced a competitor like Kale before. She could predict patterns, analyze probabilities, and plan multiple moves ahead, but Kale did not follow predictable patterns. He introduced unexpected solutions, ones that did not simply react to the arena but transformed it in subtle ways. Leora could feel her mind being stretched. When both participants entered the Innovation Dome, the audience's excitement was palpable. The air shimmered with holographic light as the arena came alive. Floating panels, shifting walkways, and a complex network of moving obstacles filled the space. It was impossible to see every angle at once, impossible to anticipate every change. And yet, the duel would demand that Leora and Kale do exactly that: adapt, innovate, and excel. The first challenge was deceptively simple. Navigate a labyrinth of floating platforms to reach a central tower where a holographic puzzle awaited. Leora moved quickly, calculating each step, adjusting for the subtle shifts in gravity. Kale followed, but instead of mirroring her movements, he observed the patterns of the arena. Then, in a move that surprised even Leora, he leapt in a slightly different trajectory, using the platform's momentum to reach a higher vantage point. From there, he solved part of the holographic puzzle before Leora had even arrived. The crowd murmured in astonishment. Leora's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in keen interest. Kale's approach was creative, unbound by the rules of expectation. He did not merely follow the path of least resistance. He found new paths, reshaping the challenge in ways that tested both his skill and hers. The duel continued, each round increasing in complexity. Next came the environment challenge, a holographic rainforest filled with shifting terrain, streams, and unstable bridges. The goal was to retrieve fragments of data scattered throughout the forest while avoiding virtual pitfalls. Leora approached with methodical precision, calculating every step, anticipating each obstacle. Kale, however, observed the forest differently. He noticed patterns, small details that suggested shortcuts and safer paths. While Leora relied on her experience, Kale relied on his perception and ingenuity. At one point, a section of the terrain collapsed beneath Leora's carefully calculated path. She adjusted quickly, but Kale had already anticipated the possibility, using the collapse as a way to leap ahead. Instead of seeing the situation as a setback, he had turned it into an opportunity. Leora realized that this duel was not about speed or raw intelligence alone. It was about how one responded to the unexpected, how one adapted and innovated in real time. As the challenge progressed, a subtle shift occurred in Leora's mind. She began to enjoy the duel in a way she had not expected. Kale's human creativity, his willingness to explore solutions beyond convention, forced her to rethink her strategies, to consider ideas she had dismissed as impractical. She felt a thrill that was not born from victory, but from the excitement of facing a worthy mind. Meanwhile, Kale moved with quiet focus. He did not rush, nor did he underestimate Leora. He understood her precision, her ability to anticipate patterns, and he respected it. But he also knew that his advantage lay in adaptability, in seeing beyond the obvious. He experimented, took small risks, and watched the results. Every move he made was measured, creative, and intentional. He was not trying to humiliate Leora or prove dominance. He wanted to demonstrate that human ingenuity could match any experience or reputation in the galaxy. Hours passed, and the arena shifted continuously. New challenges appeared, intricate puzzles that required logic, lateral thinking, and collaboration with virtual assistants, mazes with moving walls, floating platforms that responded to weight and timing. Leora and Kale adapted, countering each new obstacle with intelligence and creativity. The audience watched in awe, captivated not by combat, but by the brilliance of two minds at work. At one point, a particularly complex puzzle appeared, a network of holographic orbs that needed to be aligned in a specific sequence to unlock the next stage. Leora approached it with her usual method, analyzing patterns, testing possibilities. Kale, however, noticed a pattern in the timing of the orbs that suggested an entirely different approach. Instead of following the expected sequence, he shifted the orbs in a way that simplified the puzzle and created a new pathway. Leora observed this silently, realizing that Kale's approach was teaching her as much as it was challenging her. By the time the day ended, the duel had transformed. What began as a challenge for dominance had become a test of creativity, resilience, and respect. Leora and Kale had pushed each other to heights neither could have reached alone. The council recorded every move, every strategy, and every innovative solution. Citizens spoke excitedly about the duel, marveling at the display of human ingenuity and the possibilities it suggested for the future. After the duel, Leora and Kale stood side by side in the arena, catching their breath. The glow of the holographic lights reflected off their faces. Leora looked at Kale with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "You are unlike any opponent I have faced," she said quietly. Kale smiled faintly. "And you are unlike any tactician I have encountered. I've learned more than I expected today." There was a moment of quiet between them, a recognition that the duel had become more than a contest. It had become a meeting of minds, a shared exploration of possibility. Leora realized that while she had begun the duel expecting to assert her dominance, she had gained something unexpected, a new perspective, and perhaps even a new ally in a galaxy that often valued power over insight. The council members approached, their expressions a mix of astonishment and curiosity. They congratulated both duelists, noting the innovative approaches and the creativity displayed. Some remarked that this duel had changed the way they would think about strategy and leadership. Others whispered that Kale's human ingenuity might signal a new era in galactic tactics. Leora returned to her quarters that evening, reflecting on the day. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, a strange satisfaction that she had not expected. Kale had challenged not only her skill but her assumptions, and she realized that this was only the beginning. The duel had revealed that human creativity and courage could stand against even the most experienced and disciplined minds in the galaxy. Kale, meanwhile, walked the quiet streets outside the council complex. He did not celebrate, but he did reflect. Every step, every observation, every move in the duel had been a chance to demonstrate human potential. And in doing so, he had not only challenged Leora, he had inspired a city, perhaps even a council, to reconsider what was possible. As night fell over Orlaia Prime, both duelists prepared for what would come next. The Innovation Dome had tested them, but the galaxy was vast, filled with new challenges, unexpected opportunities, and possibilities that no simulation could fully capture. And somewhere in the quiet determination of a human mind, the future of strategy, creativity, and respect was beginning to take shape. One duel, one idea, one moment at a time. The citizens of Orlaia Prime would remember this day for years. Not because there was a victor, not because anyone had been defeated, but because they had witnessed something extraordinary. The human mind, unbound by fear or expectation, standing proudly alongside a legend. And in that moment, the story of Kale and Leora became a story not just of a duel, but of hope, ingenuity, and the promise of what humanity could achieve. The next morning, Oralia Prime was alive with anticipation. Word of the duel had spread far beyond the council chambers, beyond the Innovation Dome, and into the streets of the city. Hollow screens showed highlights from the previous challenges. Kale leaping to unexpected solutions, Leora adapting instantly to shifts she had not predicted, both minds moving in a rhythm that seemed almost impossible to follow. Citizens gathered in squares, in parks, and along the hovering streets to watch live broadcasts, their voices filled with excitement and speculation. Leora Valen rose early, her mind already running through the plans she had devised the night before. She could not shake the feeling that Kale had taught her something, even in defeat. The duel had not been about who could dominate, but about who could adapt faster, think clearer, and respond with ingenuity. For the first time in years, Leora felt the thrill of uncertainty, the kind that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts sharpen. She reviewed every angle of the upcoming challenge, aware that Kale would not simply follow her expectations. Kale, meanwhile, spent the early hours walking through the quieter parts of Oralia Prime. He observed citizens going about their routines, noting how they solved everyday problems with creativity. A young mechanic had rigged a floating platform to carry more weight. A group of students had programmed small drones to deliver supplies efficiently. Each observation added to his understanding of adaptability and innovation. The duel was not merely a test of his skills. It was a chance to explore human potential, to see how creativity could be applied beyond conventional methods. When both duelists arrived at the dome, the arena was already active, humming with energy. The walls of the chamber reflected shifting holographic landscapes that transformed the moment anyone stepped inside. Today's challenge was different. It combined environmental navigation with collaborative problem-solving. The dome generated scenarios that required working with virtual allies, intelligent holographic assistants that could be programmed in real time. Success depended not only on individual skill, but on the ability to integrate with these assistants, anticipating their behavior and using them creatively. The first obstacle appeared, a cityscape floating in midair, broken into pieces that shifted like puzzle pieces in the wind. Leora immediately began calculating paths, measuring distances, predicting the speed and timing of each moving block. Her movements were precise, graceful, each step a product of experience and foresight. Kale followed, observing carefully. Instead of mirroring her approach, he paused, looking for patterns others might overlook. A slight tilt of a building block suggested a new route, one that bypassed the expected path and opened opportunities for shortcuts. The audience watched intently, leaning forward as the duelists moved. It was no longer simply a contest. It had become a showcase of human creativity versus unparalleled experience. Leora felt a thrill she had not felt in decades, a recognition that Kale's ingenuity challenged her assumptions and forced her to see solutions she had previously ignored. She adjusted her strategy, adapting to his unconventional choices, which made the challenge more engaging than any she had faced before. Next came a puzzle that required coordination. Holographic drones appeared, each carrying pieces of a data lattice that needed to be assembled in a specific configuration. Leora immediately analyzed the situation, calculating the best way to guide the drones efficiently. Kale, however, noticed something subtle. The drones' flight patterns suggested they could be manipulated indirectly through changes in the environment. He adjusted platforms and holographic signals, subtly influencing the drones' behavior. What seemed like a simple coordination problem became an exercise in lateral thinking. Leora recognized the brilliance of his method instantly, realizing that the duel was no longer about speed alone, but about seeing opportunities beyond the obvious. The third challenge tested memory and perception. A holographic forest appeared, filled with glowing orbs that shifted positions constantly. Each orb contained a fragment of a story, a sequence that needed to be reconstructed in the correct order. Leora approached methodically, recording positions, noting patterns, and predicting movements. Kale, however, relied on intuition as much as observation. He noticed subtle cues, color changes, light intensity, and timing that suggested connections between orbs. While Leora relied on systematic calculation, Kale's approach leveraged creativity, pattern recognition, and human ingenuity. As the challenge continued, both duelists began to anticipate the arena's transformations. Leora, initially frustrated by Kale's unpredictable methods, found herself intrigued. Each unexpected solution he discovered forced her to reconsider her own strategies. Kale, in turn, respected Leora's precision and foresight, understanding that her experience made her a formidable counterpart. Neither sought to defeat the other through brute force. Instead, they pushed each other toward excellence, exploring possibilities that neither could have imagined alone. A particularly complex scenario emerged next. A holographic river split the arena into multiple paths, each path filled with floating platforms and shifting bridges. The goal was to retrieve scattered fragments of a knowledge matrix and assemble them at a central tower. Leora calculated the most efficient path, moving with precision, anticipating every shift. Kale observed for a moment, then chose an unexpected route, using the movement of a platform to create a momentum boost that allowed him to reach an elevated vantage point. From there, he solved part of the puzzle more quickly than Leora, revealing a solution that she had not considered. The audience gasped. Whispers of admiration spread through the chamber. It was not a contest of strength or firepower. It was a contest of minds, adaptability, and creativity. Citizens were captivated, seeing for themselves that ingenuity could surpass experience, that courage and innovation could equal the most disciplined skill. Hours passed as the duel continued. New challenges appeared, a maze of floating crystals that responded to sound and motion, requiring careful balance and timing. A holographic desert where mirages shifted pathways, testing perception and memory. And finally, a puzzle that required collaboration with virtual assistance to manipulate floating elements into a precise configuration. Each obstacle tested different aspects of thinking: logic, creativity, adaptation, and insight. Leora and Kale responded with equal brilliance, each move a mixture of calculated precision and inspired improvisation. By the end of the day, both duelists paused to catch their breath. The arena shimmered around them, a chaotic yet beautiful reflection of their combined efforts. Leora looked at Kale, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You are more resourceful than I anticipated," she admitted, her voice quiet in the midst of the chamber's fading lights. Kale smiled faintly. "And you are more adaptable than I imagined. I've learned as much from you as you might from me." The council members approached, noting the ingenuity and creativity displayed throughout the challenges. They were astonished, not only at Kale's ability, but at the way he had elevated Leora's performance as well. The duel had become something greater than a contest. It had become a demonstration of the power of collaboration, creativity, and respect, even within competition. The crowd erupted in applause, not for a single winner, but for the remarkable display of intelligence, courage, and imagination. Citizens spoke eagerly about what they had witnessed, a human demonstrating ingenuity on a scale they had rarely seen, challenging assumptions and inspiring curiosity. Teachers spoke of using the duel as a lesson for students. Strategists debated the techniques used. Artists found inspiration in the way two minds had danced through the arena's challenges. That night, Leora returned to her quarters, reflecting on the events of the day. She felt a mix of exhaustion, exhilaration, and anticipation. Kale's approach had forced her to see beyond her usual strategies, to recognize the power of creativity and adaptability. The duel was not over. It would continue, and she realized that the true test was not only of skill, but of insight, perception, and courage. Kale, meanwhile, walked through the quiet city streets. He did not celebrate, but he reflected on the lessons of the day. The duel had been a chance to demonstrate human ingenuity, yes, but also to learn, to observe, and to grow. He understood that the next stages of the duel would be even more challenging, requiring deeper thought, sharper perception, and even greater creativity. But he also felt confidence, knowing that the combination of human curiosity and adaptability could meet any challenge the arena, or the galaxy, might present. As Orcs Prime settled into night, both duelists prepared for the next phase. The city hummed with life, citizens talking, speculating, and marveling at the duel. The story of Kale and Leora spread beyond the council chambers, reaching every corner of the city. Children imagined themselves as strategists, engineers, or explorers. Scholars discussed tactics and creativity. Citizens felt inspired, realizing that human ingenuity, courage, and determination could stand alongside even the most elite minds of the galaxy. The duel had already achieved more than either participant might have anticipated. It had tested skill, challenged assumptions, and inspired countless people. And in the quiet confidence of a human mind, Kale carried a simple truth. Ingenuity and creativity were as powerful as experience and reputation, perhaps even more so when combined with courage and respect. Leora, in turn, carried her own realization that winning did not always mean defeating an opponent. Sometimes victory was found in pushing oneself beyond limits, learning from unexpected sources, and recognizing the brilliance in others. Kale had not begged for mercy, had not tried to dominate, and in doing so had proven that a human mind could face legends without fear, without aggression, and with nothing more than ingenuity and confidence. The duel would continue, and with it, the story of human potential. The citizens of Orcs Prime would watch, learn, and be inspired. And in the hearts and minds of the duelists themselves, a deeper respect had been formed, a recognition that true strength lay not in power, but in creativity, adaptability, and courage. The stage was set for the next challenges, and both Leora and Kale knew that the duel would continue to test them, inspire them, and perhaps change the galaxy in ways that no one could yet predict. The morning light spilled across Orcs Prime, glinting off the towers and streets with a brilliance that made the city seem almost alive. Citizens moved through the city with purpose, some heading to work, others stopping in squares to watch live holofeeds of the duel's progress. The story of Leora Valen and Kale had grown beyond the council chambers and the innovation dome. It had become a symbol of curiosity, courage, and human ingenuity. Children reenacted their favorite moments in floating playgrounds, and scholars debated the implications of Kale's creative strategies. Even the city's leaders whispered that perhaps this duel was more than a contest. It was a lesson for the galaxy. Leora Valen awoke with a strange sense of anticipation. The duel had already tested her in ways she could not have imagined. Each day brought new challenges, and each challenge revealed something she had overlooked in her decades of experience. She dressed with careful precision, but her mind raced ahead, replaying Kale's unexpected moves, the shortcuts he had found, the ingenuity that seemed to defy her expectations. She had spent a lifetime relying on experience and strategy, but Kale had shown her something different. He had shown her the power of thinking beyond rules, of observing, imagining, and creating solutions no one else could see. Kale, meanwhile, was already in the quiet streets, moving through the city at dawn. He did not rush, nor did he linger unnecessarily. He observed, as always, noticing small patterns in behavior, small adjustments in routine, and subtle innovations in everyday life. To him, the duel was a chance to demonstrate human ingenuity, yes, but it was also an opportunity to learn. Every observation could become an insight, every moment a source of inspiration. He paused by a small park where children were experimenting with floating puzzle blocks, watching as they collaborated, adjusted, and found solutions in ways he recognized as fundamentally human. A smile crossed his face. The next stage of the duel was announced by the council. Today's challenge would combine perception, intuition, and timing. The arena itself would become a dynamic landscape, shifting unpredictably and requiring immediate adjustment to solve puzzles, navigate pathways, and reach objectives. Points would be awarded not only for speed, but for creativity, adaptability, and the ability to recognize patterns others might miss. Both duelists entered the arena with a quiet determination, aware that each move they made would not only affect the outcome but inspire everyone watching. The arena shimmered to life. Floating pathways rose and fell, walls shifted and disappeared, and holographic structures hovered midair, reflecting the sun's rays. The first challenge was a network of towers connected by thin, moving bridges. Leora stepped forward with confident precision, calculating every step, anticipating the speed and tilt of each bridge. Kale followed, pausing to study the motion of the bridges, then leaping with creativity that allowed him to cross in ways that seemed impossible. Spectators gasped and whispered in awe. It was no longer simply a contest. It was a display of mind, observation, and imagination. Leora adjusted, recognizing that Kale's unpredictability forced her to think differently, to anticipate not just the arena but the choices of her opponent. For the first time in decades, she felt the rush of real uncertainty, and it thrilled her. Next came a challenge that required precision and pattern recognition. Holographic cubes floated above the arena, each containing symbols that needed to be aligned in a specific sequence. Leora moved quickly, analyzing the cubes, predicting their rotations, and calculating the correct alignment. Kale, however, noticed subtle patterns others might miss. The timing of the rotations, the subtle color shifts, the spacing of the cubes. Instead of simply copying her strategy, he innovated, creating a method that not only solved the puzzle but revealed a new path for Leora to follow. The duel continued, and something remarkable happened. Leora began to anticipate Kale's unconventional methods. She adapted, responded, and even learned from him, incorporating aspects of his approach into her own strategies. Kale, in turn, continued to respect her precision and foresight, adjusting his creativity to match her growing adaptability. The duel was no longer about competition alone. It had become a dialogue of minds, a collaboration through challenge that tested both of them to their limits. The arena shifted again, this time into a holographic cityscape filled with moving vehicles, floating walkways, and complex intersections. The objective was to retrieve scattered fragments of data while navigating this intricate environment. Leora moved with careful calculation, her steps precise and her mind focused on the optimal route. Kale, observing, noticed patterns in the movement of the vehicles and the shifting pathways. Using these observations, he devised a path that allowed him to move efficiently, solve the challenge creatively, and inspire Leora to consider alternative solutions she might not have attempted on her own. Hours passed as the challenges evolved. The arena became a reflection of the duelists' combined ingenuity, testing logic, creativity, perception, and adaptability. Leora felt a sense of exhilaration, knowing that Kale's presence forced her to grow beyond the limits of her experience. Kale felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his approach demonstrated human potential while pushing Leora to see new possibilities. A particularly striking challenge appeared near the middle of the arena, a shifting holographic bridge suspended over an invisible void. The bridge changed shape with every step, requiring both anticipation and ingenuity. Leora moved with her usual precision, analyzing each change, calculating the next step. Kale observed, then used the shifting bridge to gain a new perspective, discovering a solution that allowed both duelists to advance efficiently. For the first time, the audience saw them moving in sync, each respecting the other's approach while maintaining their individuality. The crowd erupted in quiet applause, not for a winner, but for the display of brilliance, creativity, and mutual respect. It was clear to everyone watching that this duel was about more than victory. It was about innovation, adaptability, and the recognition of talent across species. Humans, long underestimated, had shown that ingenuity, courage, and creativity could match even the most experienced tacticians in the galaxy. By late afternoon, a new challenge appeared, testing both memory and intuition. Holographic patterns shifted constantly, requiring the duelists to remember sequences while predicting changes. Leora approached methodically, her mind a precise engine calculating probabilities and outcomes. Kale, however, relied on observation and imagination, noticing connections that were not immediately obvious. The two moved through the challenge at almost the same pace, their strategies different but equally effective. A sense of camaraderie began to form. Leora noticed that she could anticipate Kale's unconventional methods, not to counter them aggressively, but to collaborate indirectly, creating solutions that neither could achieve alone. Kale, in turn, respected her experience and insight, understanding that his creativity complemented her precision. The duel had evolved from competition into a shared exploration of possibilities, a collaboration that pushed both to greater heights. As the sun set over Orcs Prime, the arena shimmered with a mosaic of holographic landscapes, reflecting the combined efforts of both duelists. Leora and Kale paused, catching their breath, and looked at each other with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Leora spoke first. "You are unlike anyone I have faced. I underestimated not only your ingenuity but your patience and insight. Kale smiled faintly. And you are unlike any tactician I have encountered. Your precision and experience are remarkable. I've learned as much from you today as you might have from me. The council members approached, observing with astonishment. They praised the creativity, adaptability, and insight displayed throughout the challenges. It was clear that this duel was no ordinary contest. It was a lesson for the galaxy, demonstrating that intelligence, ingenuity, and courage could inspire more than authority or experience alone. The citizens of Orlaia Prime cheered, not for a victor, but for the journey of two minds pushing each other to new heights. Schools used the duel as a lesson in creativity, adaptability, and collaboration. Engineers debated techniques used in navigating the shifting platforms. Scholars discussed the strategies, and ordinary citizens were inspired to think differently in their daily lives. Leora returned to her quarters that evening, reflecting on the day's events. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing that Kale's creativity had pushed her beyond the limits of her usual strategies. She realized that this duel was teaching her something deeper. That victory was not always about defeating an opponent, but about learning, growing, and recognizing brilliance in others. Kale walked through the quiet streets of Orlaia Prime, thinking similarly. He had demonstrated human ingenuity, yes, but he had also learned from Leora's precision and experience. The duel had shown him that collaboration, even in competition, could elevate everyone involved. He understood that the next stage would be even more challenging, requiring sharper perception, greater creativity, and deeper insight. But he felt confident, knowing that adaptability, observation, and courage would carry him forward. As night fell over the city, Orlaia Prime seemed to glow with possibility. The duel had become more than a contest. It had become a symbol of what humans could achieve when their minds were applied creatively, courageously, and without fear. Citizens spoke in hushed tones about the human who dared to challenge a legend and the tactician who adapted and learned alongside him. Children imagined themselves as strategists, engineers, and explorers. Scholars wrote about the lessons of the duel. And in the quiet determination of two minds, a deeper respect had formed, a recognition that true strength lay not in dominance, but in creativity, adaptability, and mutual respect. The duel would continue, and both Leora and Kale knew that the next stage would test them even further. But they also knew something important. Together, they had already changed the expectations of what was possible. And in that quiet confidence, the story of human ingenuity, courage, and resilience continued to grow, inspiring everyone who witnessed it, one brilliant move at a time. The city of Orlaia Prime was quiet in the early morning, but anticipation hung thick in the air. The citizens, scholars, and council members alike gathered to witness the final stage of the duel between Captain Leora Valen and Commander Kale. The story of their contest had spread across the galaxy, reaching distant colonies and distant moons. Many were eager to see the culmination of what had become more than a simple duel. It was a demonstration of human ingenuity, courage, and creativity against a mind seasoned by decades of experience. Leora Valen woke before dawn, her mind already moving through the challenges ahead. The previous duels had tested everything she knew, but this final stage would test something more: insight, adaptability, and collaboration under extreme conditions. She dressed with careful precision, though she felt an unusual calmness. Unlike before, she no longer approached the duel simply to assert dominance. Kale had taught her a lesson that could not be ignored, that creativity and ingenuity were as vital as experience and precision. Kale, too, rose early, walking through the quiet streets of the city. He observed the patterns of life, as always, noting the subtle ways people solved problems, adapted to change, and collaborated without conflict. For him, the duel was more than a contest. It was a way to show that humans could think differently, act bravely, and inspire others through intellect rather than force. Each step he took reinforced his belief that courage and creativity were universal tools, capable of matching even the most seasoned strategists in the galaxy. When both duelists arrived at the arena, the Innovation Dome was already shimmering with dynamic light. Today's stage would be the most complex yet. The arena combined elements of all previous challenges, shifting landscapes, floating platforms, puzzles, and holographic collaborators, but added a new layer. The environment itself would respond to their actions, changing unpredictably to reward creative thinking and adaptability. The council explained the rules once more. No harm would come to either participant, no destruction was allowed, and success would be measured in ingenuity, problem-solving, and collaboration. The first challenge appeared, a series of floating islands suspended over a glowing void. Each island contained pieces of a knowledge matrix that needed to be collected and assembled at a central tower. Leora stepped forward with her usual precision, calculating the most efficient path and anticipating every movement. Kale followed, pausing only briefly to observe the environment, and then leaping in an unconventional path that allowed him to reach islands in a sequence Leora had not considered. The audience watched in awe. Every move, every adjustment, every innovation was a lesson in human potential. Leora realized that Kale's creativity forced her to see beyond her own strategies, to recognize opportunities she would have dismissed in the past. Kale, in turn, admired Leora's foresight and precision, understanding that her experience shaped a level of insight few could match. As they advanced, the arena shifted again. A holographic forest appeared, dense with luminous flora, shifting terrain, and hidden puzzles. The goal was to navigate through the forest, collect data nodes, and reach a clearing where a final challenge awaited. Leora moved with calculated grace, her eyes scanning for patterns and timing each step with precision. Kale observed first, then moved in a way that combined intuition with clever manipulation of the environment. Using subtle adjustments, he influenced the movement of floating platforms and pathways, creating options for both duelists to navigate efficiently. The crowd gasped as they witnessed Kale's ingenuity. This was no longer a simple duel. It had become a demonstration of collaboration through competition. Leora noticed the subtle ways he adapted the environment, and instead of resisting or competing against his moves, she incorporated them into her strategy. For the first time, the duel became a shared effort, a dance of minds pushing each other to new heights. The next obstacle was a holographic river of light that split the arena into multiple sections. The water shimmered with floating platforms that moved unpredictably. The knowledge fragments they needed were scattered across these platforms, requiring timing, balance, and creative thinking to reach. Leora calculated each jump and movement carefully, predicting the shifts in platform speed and position. Kale, however, looked for patterns others might miss, noticing slight rhythms in the river's flow. Using this observation, he adjusted his movements and even subtly guided Leora's path, creating a synergy that allowed them to advance efficiently. As the day progressed, the challenges became increasingly complex. A maze of shifting holographic walls required memory and perception. A puzzle involving floating orbs tested logic and timing, and a platform sequence demanded collaboration with virtual assistants that responded only to clever manipulation. Each time, Kale's unconventional approach complemented Leora's precise calculations, creating solutions neither could have achieved alone. By late afternoon, the arena presented the final test. A massive tower of shifting blocks rose in the center, floating in midair, its walls moving unpredictably. At the top was the final knowledge matrix they needed to assemble. Leora began her ascent with careful precision, timing each step, calculating the movement of the blocks and predicting their shifts. Kale followed, observing first, then moving with creativity and intuition, finding paths and solutions Leora had overlooked. The audience held their breath as the two moved in perfect balance, adapting to the constantly changing tower. Every step required attention, every move demanded ingenuity. Leora realized that Kale's approach was teaching her not only to anticipate, but to embrace flexibility, to consider multiple solutions instead of relying solely on calculation. Kale, in turn, respected Leora's ability to predict and plan, understanding that her precision ensured progress even in the most unpredictable conditions. At the final platform, the last puzzle awaited, assembling the knowledge matrix in a precise sequence that required both observation and creativity. Leora approached it systematically, aligning pieces with careful attention to pattern and structure. Kale, noticing connections between pieces that were not immediately obvious, suggested a subtle adjustment that allowed the sequence to come together more efficiently. Leora paused, considering his approach, and then incorporated it seamlessly. Together, they completed the puzzle. The chamber exploded with light and color as the knowledge matrix activated, floating high into the air as a shimmering holographic display. The crowd erupted in applause, not for a victor but for the brilliance, ingenuity, and cooperation that had been displayed. Scholars, students, and citizens alike marveled at the demonstration of human potential. Kale had shown creativity and courage. Leora had shown precision and insight. Together, they had achieved something far greater than victory. They had inspired an entire city, perhaps even the galaxy. As the light faded, Leora and Kale stood side by side, catching their breath, faces reflecting the glow of the arena. Leora looked at Kale, a mixture of admiration and newfound respect in her eyes. "You have challenged me in ways I could not have imagined," she said quietly. "I underestimated not only your ingenuity, but your ability to see possibilities others overlook." Kale smiled faintly. "And you have shown me that precision, experience, and foresight can elevate creativity. I've learned more from you than I expected." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of what they had accomplished settling around them. The duel had begun as a contest of skill and strategy, but it had evolved into something greater, a meeting of minds, a collaboration through challenge, and a lesson in courage, ingenuity, and respect. The council members approached, their expressions filled with astonishment and admiration. They praised the duel not for a single winner, but for the demonstration of creativity, intelligence, and mutual respect. The citizens of Oralia Prime cheered, their voices carrying across the city. Children, inspired by the display, imagined themselves as strategists, inventors, and explorers. Scholars debated techniques and strategies, engineers considered applications for real-world problems, and ordinary citizens felt the thrill of seeing human ingenuity shine. Leora returned to her quarters that evening, reflecting on the duel's conclusion. She felt exhaustion, yes, but also exhilaration and pride. She had learned that victory was not always about defeating an opponent, but about growth, understanding, and recognizing brilliance in others. Kale had not begged for mercy, had not sought to dominate. Instead, he had demonstrated courage, creativity, and ingenuity, proving that humans could stand alongside legends through intellect and insight alone. Kale, walking the quiet streets that night, felt similarly. He had demonstrated human ingenuity, yes, but he had also learned from Leora's precision, foresight, and discipline. The duel had shown him that collaboration, even in competition, could elevate everyone involved. He understood that true strength lay not in power or reputation, but in courage, adaptability, and creative thinking. The citizens of Oralia Prime would remember this duel for generations. Not because there was a winner, not because anyone was defeated, but because they had witnessed something extraordinary. Two minds, different yet complementary, pushing each other to achieve brilliance, inspiring countless others in the process. Schools taught the strategies used, engineers adapted the problem-solving methods, and storytellers shared the tale of human ingenuity standing proudly alongside legendary skill. As the night deepened, the city seemed to glow with possibility. The duel had been more than a contest. It had become a symbol of what humans could achieve when they applied courage, creativity, and determination. It was a story that would inspire future generations to think boldly, act creatively, and face challenges with confidence. Leora and Kale knew that their duel had changed something in the galaxy, even if subtly. They had demonstrated that ingenuity could match experience, that creativity could complement precision, and that collaboration, even in competition, could elevate both parties. They had proven that humans, often underestimated, possessed potential that could rival the most seasoned tacticians. And in that quiet, luminous moment, as they stood in the center of the arena, they realized that the duel had achieved its true purpose. It was never about domination, fear, or victory in the traditional sense. It was about inspiration, growth, and the celebration of ingenuity. Humans had shown that courage and creativity were powerful tools, and Leora and Kale had shown that true brilliance could be achieved through respect, collaboration, and daring to think differently. The galaxy would remember this day, the day a human asked for a duel not to beg, not to surrender, but to demonstrate courage, creativity, and intellect. And the day a legend, Leora Valen, realized that strength and mastery were not only measured by experience, but by the ability to learn, adapt, and respect the brilliance in others. As the arena emptied and the citizens of Oralia Prime returned to their lives, a quiet energy remained in the city, a spark of possibility, a reminder that ingenuity, courage, and creativity could shine brightly, no matter the odds. And somewhere in the minds of the duelists, a new understanding had formed. The greatest victories were not those won alone, but those shared, celebrated, and remembered for the inspiration they created.